I'm a Navajo teacher on the Navajo reservation. I grew up on the reservation, so I'm a product of their local day school, public school, and a boarding school. My late parents were my rock. My mom practically raised my siblings and I by herself. My father was a kind man. He was a World War II veteran who fought post-traumatic stress disorder. My grandparents refused to place their children in a boarding school. At that time, the government had sent out Indian agents to collect Navajo children and force them to relocate off the reservations. My mother and her siblings were hidden. Although my mother didn't attend formal school, she made sure all of us graduated from high school. We all continued to study either in trade school or universities. Because my mother refused to speak a word of English, I learned my language fluently. By the time I was 12 years old, I could speak, read, and write Navajo. As a teacher, I want to give back to my community. Before I became a teacher, I was an independent computer consultant. My job took me away from my kids, so I decided one day to teach. Back then, the first thing I noticed was the achievement gap, as all my colleagues had expressed their concerns. I also noticed that my students can barely speak their language. If they knew, they were embarrassed. As the years went by, the achievement gap widened according to the standardized tests. I began to ask questions. How can the students be expected to learn at a fast rate and compete with the mainstream society when they do not have a primary language of their own? They were not speaking Navajo, and they were not speaking English fluently. Throughout the years, I began to sneak in Navajo language into my instruction. Every year it feels like the greatest battle. At the beginning of the school year, I throw a Navajo word into my instruction. At first, my students resist the words. By the end of the school year, they crave both languages. The improvement on their standardized test scores vary from year to year. They improve either by 2 years or more. In the early 1900s, the government began its assimilation process. All Indians were to forget their language and culture. After more than 50 years, the damage was done. My people began to lose their language. And since the language has been disappearing. Our students are living the effects of it.